Sit back and relax. It's a big podcast day. This, my friends, is the Erik Hollnagel Show. Howdy, everybody. It's Todd Conklin, and this is the Pre-Accident Podcast. How are you today? Good, I hope. Hey, it's a big show. This will be kind of exciting. If you've not heard of or ever been a part of a discussion around the ETO principle, ETTO, efficiency, thoroughness, trade-off, or safety 1, safety 2, or the FRAM, the functional resonance model, or, God, I could just go on for months, I tell you. Then if you haven't ever had those kind of conversations, today's going to be a really exciting day for you because everything's going to be new and shiny like a penny found on the street. If you have, you're probably even more excited because if you had these conversations, today you're going to get to talk to somebody who is just quite amazing, Erik Hollnagel. And Erik is just a fine human being. Let's start with there. And I didn't think I would get him on the podcast, but I kind of tricked him. I'm not saying I blackmailed him. I tricked him. It's less severe than blackmail. But he had to introduce me at a conference a couple weeks ago, and he asked me to write some things down for the introduction, and I said, I'd love to. I'll give them to you when we record a podcast. And he fell for it. I mean, he totally fell for it. Just hook, line, and sinker. Boom. I had him. So that is how that started, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's bring you up on the speed of light in the world around us. It's an exciting day. I've had tremendous amounts of things go on and many things to talk to you about, but probably the big one I should talk to you about is the power of resilience. And the reason I'm going to tell you about the power of resilience is because I spilt not a Diet Coke, but in fact a Coke Zero Sugar. Pretty much a full-blown Coke Zero Sugar. I spilled from the little plastic tray on the back of the airline seat into my briefcase. And luckily for me, my briefcase was holding my computer. And luckily for me, my computer was standing upright. So like on the skinny end, it was standing up because, it was in the briefcase. And even more luckily for me, I'd put the top of the case, not the keyboard where the clamshell closes, but the back hinge where the vents are for cooling the laptop. So when I did spill that Coke Zero Sugar, it did travel into my briefcase and directly down into my computer. Yes, it's true. I lost it all. It was gone. It was a sad day for my computer. Oh, so sad. And it's kind of non-recoverable, although I did take it to the computer place because they said it's worth taking it to the computer place. But I'm pretty sure if the Coke can live through, I'm sure the Coke lived. If the computer lives through the Coke Zero Sugar bath, I will be amazed because not a lot. It's just one of those little, it's an airplane. You've been on a million of them. One of those little plastic cups on that little tray. And see, now you probably can just lean that tray out and casually work on it. For me, I have to kind of suck in a little to bring the tray down, and I moved around and it turned the tray and it went up, and you can write the ending. I kind of wish that the Coke would have gone in the magazine pocket because I don't really own the magazine pocket, nor do I care much about it. But alas, it went into my briefcase. But there's good news. Yes, I have good news for you. And the good news is I back it up. And that is the power of resilience. I can't control when I'm going to spill a Coke in my briefcase, clearly. I think I've proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. That I clearly cannot control. But what I can control is my response to a Coke being spilled in my briefcase. And my response was that I had a backup. And I had to get a new computer. You knew that was coming. And I plugged it into the little thing, and it said, do you want to start new or do you want to copy off your old computer? And I clicked copy off your old computer, and 45 minutes later, probably not even that long. I probably made that up. a little period time, let's say 45 minutes, that's kind of an estimate later, it looked just like my last computer. It was just, a little bit. I lost some notes that I'd taken, and and I lost an article I brought down about the school bus driver in Chattanooga. But I think I can still find it, because I was really interested in that school bus driver, because they're saying he was on the phone, but he's saying he was not on the phone. There was another truck involved. So the story's now starting to build around culpability. Well, it's already, I would say, built around culpability, but now it's moving into sort of lawyer speak, and so that's interesting as well. That is my giant story. That took a long time to tell. But the good news is, the reason I'm not so upset about it, and I'm really not, it's just a computer, right, is I think because it was backed up. And that really is that emphasis around the notion of resilience that I think makes the biggest difference in the world. So that is kind of what we're going to talk about. Now, to get started on this podcast, I'm going to jump right in, because I've already probably taken too much of your time telling that stupid story. Erik and I sat down, and the first thing I asked him is, what's the future look like? Which is normally a question I kind of save till the end, but I was really curious to see what he had to say. So let's jump into this podcast. This is Erik Hollnagel and Todd Conklin on the Pre-Accident Podcast. Listen carefully, because the first thing he's going to say is kind of what he's thinking about is happening next.
Well, in the next 3 or 4 years, I don't think we'll see much real difference. You'll see growing interest, but I mean, if you see it playing out in the sense of having an impact, you're talking 10, 15 years or even more. If you look at the paradigms that we have now. I don't know where it will be going. I know what I'm interested in is to actually try and get rid of the word safety and the term safety, and to look at system performance. Safety is an aspect of system performance, but I'm interested in how systems, organizations function, and to understand that functioning and to be able to manage that functioning. And safety in the classical sense is a part of that, but so is quality, so is sustainability, so is customer satisfaction, so is efficiency, so is environmental impact. There's so many things that are part of that, and we need. I want to see them together and want to understand how they work together.
But isn't that close to sort of blasphemous? I mean, do you get pushback when you talk about that outside of the academy?
Actually, I don't talk much about it in the academy. I'm not really an academic, not anymore. But no, in fact, people are very interested in that, because I think, you must have seen that yourselves, that people feel that they are stuck in silos, and they treat safety as if you could treat it isolated from whatever else happens in an organization, and we all know you can't. And it's just that we don't have the concepts and the terminology and the ideas really to bind it all together. And I think that's for me what's interesting, and what I'm trying in my own feeble way to work a little at. But I don't know whether that's where it's going. I do see we have in healthcare had over the last conferences in resilient healthcare a number of papers that sort of try to dissolve the difference between quality and safety. And I think that's certainly the right way to go.
Tell us about your journey. How did you get to where you are? What led you to think about these ideas?
That's a question I find very difficult to answer, because the honest answer is it just happened. I mean, it wasn't a journey in retrospect. You can see I have sailed these waves and changed course here and there, but it wasn't pre-planned or in any way. It just happened.
What started your interest? I mean, what made it start to happen? Was there an accident? Did somebody include you in a failure? I mean, where'd this kind of take its origin?
Hard to say. I mean, I of course I was working with nuclear control room design and human machine systems when 3 Mile Island happened, of course, and that focused everybody's interest in a certain direction. And as a psychologist, I was always a bit skeptical about the idea of human error as a separate cause and a special cause, and looking at things that go wrong all the time. So I think it's more or less that by working with issues and by talking with discussing with colleagues, good colleagues. I mean, one of the people I met I think before TMI in '78 was David Woods, and he was a young brash boy at the time, and we had a lot of interesting discussions. And I think talking with David, talking with other people, and hearing that, and sort of when you sit down and talk, you say, well, what about this and what about that, and could it be? And it gradually starts to develop, and you think that you find that some things are interesting, other things aren't, and you follow that, and it's haphazard. I mean, it ended here. It could have ended anywhere else, and so it's just serendipity, really.
So you could be like a really famous author around baking cakes if cakes would have been the serendipitous outcome of this outcome.
Probably. I like making cakes, actually. I haven't created any new cakes on my own, but I like to bake cakes, yeah, and pastry. But yeah, I mean, listen, if you asked me 10 years ago, or certainly 20 years ago, where would I be today, I would never have said I would be sitting here and talking to you. I wouldn't even have known who you were, and I wouldn't have known this world, and it just happened. I mean, it's not planned in any sense.
And yet you've had this remarkable impact. I mean, and you know this, although you may not know, but the impact you've had has been very powerful in really starting a conversation, at least in industry, around the trade-offs between being efficient and being thorough, being safe and being productive. And what's so interesting about that is I think that's always existed, but I think you brought it to the conversation in a way that allowed both operations people and academics to come together and see a ray of light. That notion of that trade-off has I think really changed the way we look at reliable systems, and that's powerful. What started all that? I mean, was that a bolt of lightning one day, or?
Well, it's the same answer as before. I don't really know. It's I should say what I'm probably trying to do all the time is trying to make sense out of things for myself. And so that I think I understand what's going on. And this idea about the trade-off is of course, very old in psychology. And it just turned out to me that this seems like a useful thing. And I noticed that I work with people, work with industries. And it's just like you get an idea and you begin to look for it and you suddenly see it everywhere. And that's where you have to be a bit cautious, because it shouldn't take over, because it is just an idea. It's not a psychological mechanism. It's just a convenient way of describing things, and any convenient way of describing things will capture something that's essential and throw away things that also potentially could be essential. And that's why you have to be very careful all the time about how you describe things. So, but again, it don't ask me how I came to think about that. It just happened some day for some reason. I may have read something somewhere or heard something, or I don't know.
That, I think, is the amazing part of it. I think you hit on it perfectly. It's the way you see the world, and I think what you bring to the table or to the discussion is a very, very interesting worldview, and that's. I mean, it's really apparent
when you read your books, the writing you've done. I mean, the remarkable way you really try to look at complexity and the way you look at sort of causation models. It's been really powerful. And really, you're kind of maybe a one-man campaign to sort of expand the world's understanding of cause. Has that served you well, or has that been a rough row to hoe?
I'm really not. I don't feel I'm on a campaign to do anything. Sometimes I do feel I'm a one man. I'm a bit alone, not quite alone, because others think and act in the same way. But I'm not really trying to make a campaign for anything. As I said, and this is really honest, I really try to understand things myself, to make sense of things myself and the world, whatever happens in the world. And that needs sometimes concepts and ideas that I can't find, and then I stumble upon them. Or we talked about apropos podcasts and reading, and I mean, I've read a lot, I still read a lot, and I think a lot of what I've read over the years, it's there in the back of my mind, and the mind works in a weird and wonderful way. And you read something else and something clicks and say, isn't that a bit like that? It reminds you of, and then something pops up. You can't really explain it; it just happens. But I think you can. I wouldn't even say I prepare it, but I have a pleasure in reading many different things, many different sciences, books of all kinds, and I think there are sort of nuggets there that one thing, the term I've used and many others have used is what you look for is what you find. But sometimes what you look for is not what you're conscious you look for, but you still look for it because the brain has this ability to relate what you perceive to what's in there, even though you can't remember what's in there. And then sometimes sort of a little signal pops up, and you work a bit on it, and it turns out to be useful, and that's how it works. But I mean, it's a mystery to me.
If you were to advise people the books that you've written to read, what do you think you'd have them read? What are the books that you think you're most proud of? You're most effective with? It's a good question, I know.
That's an unfair question. You mentioned the Eto principle, and I think that I'm pretty proud of that. I think that was a neat way of formulating an idea that had been existing for a long time, and others have thought of before. But being fortunate to be able to come up with examples to illustrate that, I think that's very important when you write something, to be able to illustrate it. So I think the Eto principle is something I feel is a nice piece of work. And I mean, the two other ones that are really, I don't want to say I'm proud of them, but I really think are decent works are Fram and Safety 1 and Safety 2. I think Fram in particular, Safety 1 and Safety 2 is not that original, because this idea about you can look at things in different ways has been around for many times. And the ideas of Fram, of course, has also been around, but not sort of put together in a single place before. And I think that's perhaps a bit original, but I'm not sure how much. But and Fram is something I'm still working on. It's still developing. It's still being extended.
I think your framework, at least for my career at the National Laboratories in the United States, that book changed the way we really thought about learning technically across the board. It was a powerful tool for us, and the timing seemed really right. And it really was, as odd as this sounds, at the time it was somewhat controversial to talk about cause other than sort of monocausal phenomena, and that surprises me. But maybe it surprises me just because of work you've done and others like you, we've sort of moved beyond the fallacy of monocausality. But it's a powerful force, and you see it in industry. I mean, that's what we try to tackle. What advice would you give a person who's managing work, who's actually out in the field doing this new work? What would you tell them to think about, or to listen to, or to read?
Can I just come back to one thing you said?
Absolutely.
The word timing. I mean, and because I think maybe I've just been lucky. I've come up with some ideas, and the environment has been receptive to them. Others have come up with the same ideas at a time when the environment was not receptive to them. So it's very much about timing. The right thought at the right time, and you can't control that. That's just sheer luck that it happens.
Well, if I may, I would also suggest that the way you package the ideas and the way you create analogies and discussions and case studies and examples, I think actually makes these rather esoteric concepts more impactful. I think that's one thing you bring to the field is a remarkable way to look at pretty woolly ideas and make them have realistic applications.
Well, I'm flattered that you say so. It's as I said, I'm really trying to explain it to myself, to make it understandable to myself, and of course by doing that you can hopefully also make it understandable to others. So, but it's I've always admired people who write. Jim Reason in particular, who writes really, really well, and it's I still admire his writing, and there are a lot of other people who don't write so well. I shan't mention their names here, but it's. I think I've just been lucky that I have the ability to write in an understandable way. I mean, I don't know how it happened, but that's how it is. But to come back to your question, there is a famous samurai in Japan called Miyamoto Musashi, who in the 17th century, and who was sort of the undisputed master, and ended his life peacefully as a Zen philosopher, a Zen monk. And he wrote a book which has been translated into English. It's quite famous. It's called The Book of Five Rings, and it's been used on Wall Street, sort of a management Bible also. But he made some observations about what you need to do to be able to be successful, in his case as in a sword fight, but in general also. And one of the advices he gives is to perceive the things that cannot be seen. And I think that's what I think a good manager should do. He should perceive the things that cannot be seen. That is, the things that are not obvious or do not attract attention by themselves, but which are still there, which are sort of hidden in the background, because they can be very, very important. And I think that's a skill you have to learn to. And again, to come back to the Eto, that's an efficiency thoroughness trade-off, because you have to spend some time looking at things that seemingly are unimportant, but which actually in many cases turn out to be very important. So in the long run, the efficiency is reduced by spending time on that. But in the short run, the efficiency is reduced because you spend time on being more thorough. But in the long run, it actually improves efficiency to do that. And so that would be, if you, and I don't like giving advice to people about what they should do. I mean, but to me, that the advice of Musashi to perceive the things that cannot be seen is really important. And sort of looking at the things that often stare you in the eye and are so obvious that you miss them. And you have to sort of question yourself all the time and say, what am I really doing here? What am I looking at?
That's phenomenal. What's your next book going to be about?
I don't have any firm plans for a next book. It may happen, may not happen. Well, I mean, well, there is a series of books we've been doing on resilient healthcare, and that seems to be going on. I just completed editing the 4th book, and we are in the process of working on the 5th book. But that's sort of a collective effort. And perhaps you're asking whether I would do a monograph myself, and if time permits, and if I can find a way of doing it, maybe what we talked about in the beginning, the development of safety too, sort of getting towards an understanding of how an organization works, which is not tied up to specific issues or criteria such as safety and quality and efficiency, but it looks at the whole in another way. That's why I like the term that I use, safety synthesis, because I think I don't like safety so much now, but I like synthesis because I think it's a synthesis that we need to achieve and we need to understand, we need to work at. So maybe something along those lines. Who knows?
I think you're right. I think safety as a term has probably carried about as much water as it can carry, and is no longer aligns with the way that we currently think about sort of reliable operations or reliable systems. Why do you think healthcare is so slow to come around to the new view?
I don't know why. I mean, are they slow in coming around to this view? I think healthcare has always been about being careful and making sure that nothing happens to patients. That's a part of the Hippocratic Oath. Mm-hmm. First of all, do no harm. That's what it says. So that's 2,000 years old, so you can't really say that's slow.
Okay, fair enough.
But then I think healthcare has been a system that worked under its own conditions for a long, long time. And then only maybe about 50, 60 years ago, it started to be more tightly coupled to other aspects of society. And it started to get the focus of society and authorities, also because it started to become more and more expensive, and then people are more and more concerned, and then the pressure came on the Institute of Medicine report on to err is human and stuff like that, and then the pressure was there, and then as in every other industry, when the pressure suddenly comes on, like nuclear after TMI, like aviation in a number of cases, they sort of rush around like crazy and look for solutions wherever they can, and they borrow solutions from others and apply them, and usually they don't work because they're not designed for that specific purpose. So healthcare is in that situation now, but I think if it's partly because of the external pressure that came for any number of reasons.
I find that really interesting, this idea that they borrow solutions from other industries and they don't work because they're not designed to work in that industry. That's actually a really good example, at least in the United States, of kind of where healthcare currently is around. I mean, but their failure rates is quite remarkable. I mean, it's hard to imagine the system getting worse.
But again, I think it's wrong to talk about the failure rate, because you should realize what they are facing an incredibly complex situation, and very often they compare themselves and others compare healthcare with aviation, but that's really unfair, because I mean, if every patient was standardized the same way that aircraft are, then, of course, it would be a lot better in healthcare, but they aren't. And we tend to look at aviation and say, look at it, it's great. It's the probability of fatality is 1 in 7 million or 1 in 14 million or whatever. But if you look at the statistics for damage or misdirected luggage, it's 1 in 350, which is much closer to what hospitals are. So it depends on which kind of numbers you look at. And I'm not saying healthcare couldn't do better. It could do a lot better, but you also need to understand how incredibly complex the situation is and how completely how constrained it is in terms of resources and demands. And what they experience is an onslaught of new technology constantly, which means they never have time to learn and to get the system to work. They never reach an equilibrium. They're always disturbed. Whereas most other industries, certainly aviation, reach an equilibrium state. And then there's a new technology. In healthcare, it's sort of not daily, but weekly, monthly. Things change all the time. And you never have a chance to learn. And you can never start really to work on reducing the number of things that go wrong.
What'd you think? Wasn't that great? It was really a great conversation. And I thank him so much. I really appreciate him taking the time to do this. And it really is something he doesn't have to do for sure. And nor does he see himself as kind of a podcaster, video kind of person. But I just think this opportunity was worth its weight in gold. And I want to especially thank Erik and Chevron for supporting him on his journey over here and for allowing me some time to sort of take him away, and everybody else that was involved with this adventure. It was completely worth it. But mostly I want to thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. The numbers are kind of nutty, and I can't do it without you, that's for sure. Tell your friends, subscribe. That seems to make some kind of weird difference. Write a review. This is an Erik Hollnagel podcast. Where else are you going to find that? Just saying. That's all I'm doing is just saying. But until then, learn something new every single day, and I'll bet you did today. I'll bet you a nickel you did today. Have as much fun as you possibly can, and for goodness sakes, be safe.